Somewhere in rural Nebraska, at 11 in the evening, a freight conductor opens a soft-sided cooler and takes out a sandwich he packed 14 hours ago. The cab temperature is 94 degrees. The sandwich is warm. He has been on duty for 11 hours and 40 minutes. In 20 minutes, federal law will force him to stop the train wherever it happens to be. The sandwich is his dinner. The cooler is his kitchen. And the locomotive has been his home since Tuesday. Here is where it starts. The Federal Railroad Administration does not require a freight locomotive to have a bed, a shower, a stove, or running hot water. It never has. What it does require is that the crew stop working after 12 consecutive hours on duty. Federal Law 49 U.S.C. Section 21103 is precise about this. The moment that clock expires, wherever the train happens to be, the crew ties it down, calls the dispatcher, and waits. The mandatory rest period that follows is 10 consecutive hours. Undisturbed. That word has legal weight. If the railroad contacts the crew for any reason during those 10 hours, the clock resets from zero. Not from where it left off, from zero. The law is specific about time. It is silent about space. It says nothing about what the crew sleeps on, eats from, or washes with. It does not require the railroad to provide a kitchen, a bunk, or a shower anywhere on the train itself. That silence was not always a problem. For 150 years, the train carried its own answer, and then, in 1982, one regulatory decision removed it. The decision saved the railroad's money. What it removed from the train has never been replaced, and it is the reason that sandwich in Nebraska is warm. That answer was the caboose. The red car at the end of every freight train was not a novelty. It was a functional workspace. Inside, bunks for the conductor and brakeman, a stove for cooking, running water, storage for food and supplies, and a raised cupola at the roof line where someone could watch the entire length of the train for dragging equipment or overheating axles. The caboose was a kitchen, a dormitory, and a rolling office. The conductor managed paperwork there. The brakeman ate there. On long runs through mountains or desert, the crew slept there. It was the answer to every question the title of this video asks. And it was the answer for a century and a half. Then the railroads found a cheaper answer. In the early 1980s, railroad companies began lobbying the Federal Railroad Administration to drop the caboose requirement. Their argument was straightforward. New technology could do the observation work for less. The end-of-train device, a compact electronics box clamped to the air hose at the rear of the last car, could read brake line pressure and transmit it forward to the locomotive cab continuously. One radio signal replaced one human observer. The FRA agreed. In 1982, the requirement that freight trains carry a caboose was dropped. The transition happened fast. By the late 1980s, the caboose had largely disappeared from mainline freight railroading in the United States and Canada. The financial case was not subtle. In 1980, operating a caboose cost 92 cents per mile. On a 1,000-mile run, that is nearly $1,000 in caboose costs alone, before factoring in the wages of the crew members riding in it. End-of-train devices removed that cost entirely. What went with it was the only kitchen, the only bunk, and the only running water on a freight train. The conductor moved up to the locomotive cab. The crew that had once operated semi-independently across the length of a 2-mile train was now crammed into a space the size of a large van, sharing one forward-facing view of the track ahead. Crew sizes dropped over time. Trains that carried an engineer, conductor, and 1 or 2 brakemen gradually shrank to 2-person operations, and the jobs that used to require people watching from the rear were handled by electronics that never needed to eat, sleep, or use a bathroom. But the people at the front still did, and after 1982, there was nowhere on the train to do any of it. What exists now is a system built around what is not on the locomotive. The locomotive itself has a toilet, not a plumbed fixture connected to a sewer system, an RV-style unit with a hand pump flush mounted in a narrow compartment near the nose of the cab. Some units have a fold-down sink. Most do not have running hot water. There is no shower, no stove, no refrigerator, no sleeping berth of any kind. The railroad provides a crew pack, paper towels, wet naps, a bandage, hand degreaser, and toilet paper. That is the complete list of amenities supplied by the railroad for a 12-hour duty period in a locomotive cab. Everything else comes from the crew themselves. The cooler is standard equipment. Crews freeze water bottles the night before and pack food that survives without refrigeration, or that can be kept cold until the ice runs out. In summer, cab temperatures in older locomotives regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In that environment, food safety becomes a practical problem. The Railroad Forum. Railroad.net has a thread that has been running for years in which crews exchange advice on what holds up in heat, what survives a 12-hour run without a cooler, and what to bring when you know you might be stranded in a siding for an unscheduled 3-hour meet. Pizza delivery to the locomotive has become something of a folk tradition on routes where a dispatcher will approve a brief tie-down near a town. When the clock expires and the crew outlaws, a van arrives. The railroad has contracts with hotels near major terminals, and the standard arrangement is that the crew is transported to a contracted motel, checked in, and left to begin their mandatory rest period. The 10-hour clock starts when they walk through the hotel door, not when they board the van, not when they arrive at the terminal, when they are in the room. That rest period is legally required to be undisturbed. A phone call from the railroad restarts the clock. In practice, unions have fought for years to enforce this. The away-from-home terminal must, by federal requirement, written into collective bargaining agreements, provide facilities for food and lodging. In most cases, that means a contracted chain motel, a vending machine, or a 24-hour fast food location within driving distance, and a shower in the room. Crews waiting to be called back toward home can sit in that motel for 18 to 48 hours on the BNSF system, unpaid, before a train becomes available. The shower is solved, the food is managed, the sleep is technically guaranteed, but the time cost of the entire loop, from home terminal to away-from-home motel to the wait for a return train, can consume days of a crew member's week without counting as either duty time or paid rest. That gap has its own name in railroad labor law: limbo time. This is the thing nobody tells you about the way freight train crews survive a 3-day run. The caboose problem is not an engineering gap. It is a decision that was made in 1982 and has never been reversed. The railroads lobbied to remove the caboose because the end-of-train device was cheaper. The device worked. The observation function was replaced, but the kitchen, the bunk, and the running water had no electronic equivalent, and no replacement was ever required. The regulatory change that made the caboose optional made those things optional by extension. In 2011, a BNSF train in Red Oak, Iowa, rear-ended a work train. Both crew members were killed. The NTSB investigation found both workers asleep due to fatigue from irregular schedules. In the week before the crash, the engineer had worked 3-day shifts, taken 2 days off, and switched to nights. The crash occurred near sunrise, when he had likely been awake for close to 24 hours. The NTSB concluded he had been unconsciously disabling an inactivity alarm every 2 minutes while asleep. The alarm had sounded 1 minute and 53 seconds before impact. The structural choices that produced that outcome, the irregular schedule, the crew without a designated rest space, the fatigue that built across a week, were all still in place when that train departed. They are still in place today. The answer to how train crews sleep, eat, and stay clean on a 3-day run is that the train itself was never designed to help them do any of it. Subscribe for more engineering stories that reveal the logic beneath the surface of things we take for granted.